People are confused, they're upset, they don't know what to think, they don't know what to do. The FX3 is almost the same camera as the A7S III, right? Well, yes and no. What is up, people? Dunna here, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Sony FX3, some of the things that are different between that and the A7S III. I was one of the fortunate ones who got an A7S III early on, and I've been using it for a while now, but I recently got my hands on an FX3 and have been absolutely loving it, and I'm actually going to be buying one really soon here. So in this video, I'm going to talk about why. Now, a quick primer for these two cameras: they are both video-centric cameras. However, only the FX3 actually got called part of the Sony Cinema line. Now, whether it deserves that cinema title or not is heavily under debate all over the internet, so leave a comment down below and let me know if you think it should be called a cinema camera or not. All right, hopping into our first section, these are the things about both the A7S III and FX3 that I really like as compared to other Sony cameras. First of all, we've got the flip screen, and as someone who films himself all the time, this is huge, absolutely a game changer for me to be able to see myself without having to bring an extra monitor or without having to have some kind of a mirror contraption or using the app, which is hit or miss. Having that new flip screen is fantastic. It also opens up some options for different angles of shooting, and while there are certain cases where I do miss having that tilt up and down screen that we see on things like the A7 III, most of the time I find that I can work around that, and I much rather have the flip screen than not have it. Probably the biggest thing that these cameras introduced to the Sony lineup is 10-bit video. This has been a massive game changer for me. It allows me to use S-Log3 comfortably without having to worry that I'm going to be breaking apart my footage when I go to actually grade it. But also, these cameras have introduced 4K 60 and 4K 120, and it looks absolutely amazing. So unlike previous Sony cameras, now you don't have to upscale your slow motion. And going along with our bit depths and our frame rates, you've also got the new XAVC-SI codec, which is really awesome. It makes it really easy to edit, even though the file sizes are quite a bit bigger. And these cameras both also take fantastic stills. And with the exception of a couple of times that I wished I could have cropped in just a little bit more, the megapixel count hasn't really been an issue for me at all. Both of these cameras have insane low light capabilities. This is something that the A7S line has always been known for. Because they keep the low megapixel count on the sensor, the photo sites are larger and therefore it does better in low light. And because they share the same sensor, you're going to see the same quality and the same low light performance across these two cameras. Also new to the Sony lineup in the A7S III is the ability to have separate photo and video settings. So when you switch between photo and video modes, you'll actually switch settings as well. This feels like a bit of a no-brainer, and I feel like they should have done this a long time ago, but I'm glad that we have it now on these two cameras. And finally, for this section, we've got the new menu system on both of these cameras. This has been a long time coming for Sony, but they finally updated the menu system. Both these cameras have it, as well as the new A1. The new menu is so much easier to get around, it's much better organized, and you can use both of the touch screens to get around in the menu too. So those are some of the new updates that you might have seen on the A7S III that also carry over to the FX3. But let's take a look at some of the new things on the FX3 that the A7S III doesn't have. Starting off with some of the features that for me are kind of neutral, but might make a bigger difference for you. On the FX3, we've got more video-centric labels on the camera, as well as some of the settings are more video-centric as well. So for example, some of the buttons on the FX3 are labeled with things like zebras or iris, things that are more video-centric. This just makes it a little bit easier if you're a video shooter to know where things are, unless of course you've customized everything to something else. But beyond the buttons, in the menus themselves, there's actually some more changes that are more video-centric. For example, when you go to set up your custom buttons, it follows the video mode rather than following the photo mode. Previously, you would go in and you would set up all your custom buttons for photo mode, and then it would default to having all the video buttons follow those ones. So it's still basically the same thing. You can have two fully different sets of custom buttons depending on which mode you're in, but now the default is that the kind of main one is the video mode. And same thing with your function menu as well. Another new update for the FX3 that I'm pretty neutral about is the new color. It's gray now. instead of black. That's kind of cool. I know it has a lot to do with different materials and stuff that's going on, but in general, I think it mostly was to match the cinema line rather than their photo line. Another new feature on the FX3 is the new fan system. And while this is really cool, pun intended, it hasn't really made much of a difference for me. I'm sure there are some cases out there with people who shoot a lot more 120 or 60 frames per second or something like that, where we might need some overheating protection. Like I said, I've never run into any issues the way that I personally shoot, so I threw this in the neutral category. On the FX3, the joystick button is actually on the top, and we're gonna talk a little bit more later about the new buttons and the layout. I was really used to having that on the back on the A7S III, but I think it's something that I'll totally get used to and won't make much of a difference once I've had some more time with the FX3. And finally, in the neutral category, we've got a slightly different grip on the FX3 from the A7S III. I've heard a lot of people be either really positive about it or really negative about it, but I really don't find it to be a huge difference. Yeah, it is different. You might feel it if you grabbed one camera and then grabbed the other one right after, but I don't think it's so different that it's gonna make a big change for anyone. Actually, you know what? I shouldn't say that. It didn't make a big change for me. You do you. All right, so next we're gonna talk about some of the differences on the FX3 from the A7S III that I absolutely love. These are the reasons that I'm going to be buying an FX3. But before we hop into that, I wanna take a second and thank the sponsor of this video, Canva. This is Canva. It's an incredibly powerful online design platform and app that you can use to create pretty much any kind of design that I can think of. For example, those animated title cards that you've been seeing throughout the video so far, I made those on Canva with just a couple of clicks. Let's say you've got a new YouTube channel and you want a new banner, or maybe you want a new animated intro for your YouTube videos. Canva's got templates for that, and they've got a ton of assets that you can use in your designs, or you can upload your own. And the animated stuff is really particularly awesome for social media and marketing. Everything looks amazing, it's easy to use, and everything is designed to move your audience. But to really understand the capabilities of Canva, you have to check it out for yourself. So there's a link down in the description with a special coupon code that you can use. Check out all the pro features where you get 244 times more assets, as well as special features like content calendars and scheduling. Thank you to Canva for making my life so much easier. Okay, so here are the things about the FX3 that are making me buy one even though I already own an A7S III. First of all, and probably most importantly, I love the form factor of the FX3. It's a little bit thicker than the A7S III is, but they've chopped off the EVF so it's shorter. I almost never use an EVF on any of my cameras, so I was really happy to see them just chop it off and save me the space. This also means that if you're gonna fly this camera on a gimbal, you've got more clearance on the top, and it makes room for the new top handle, which we'll talk about in a second. The next thing that I love about the FX3 actually surprised me a little bit, and that is the button layout. And the reason that it surprised me is because I was so used to the previous layouts of the A7 III and A7S III, which are relatively similar, and I knew that there were some big changes made to this body. Particularly, they've gotten rid of the mode dial, which I thought was going to be a big problem for me, but they've replaced it with a mode button, and honestly, it's quite easy to use. In fact, I would argue that it's easier to use than the current locking system that they have on the mode dial for the A7S III. You hit the mode button and it brings it up on the screen, you go and change your mode, good to go. The other thing that they've taken off is the exposure compensation dial, which is pretty fine by me. I can find that somewhere in a menu if I really need it, but it's not something that I use very regularly. And finally, they've moved the power button over to the back on the left-hand side of the camera, and they've replaced it with a zoom rocker, which I absolutely love. And I know a lot of people are kind of annoyed by this, but Sony cameras have something called clear image zoom, which basically allows you to punch in by a certain amount with very little or no quality loss. Now, this zoom rocker can also be used with lenses that have power zoom enabled, but personally, I've been absolutely loving this for getting just a little bit extra reach out of my prime lenses, or if I need a little bit of extra reach out of the end of, let's say, my 16 to 35. The one downside to using clear image zoom is that you kind of lose what I call smart autofocus. It goes into a much more basic autofocus mode. But as long as you're aware that that's going to happen, I find that it's pretty workable. The next thing that kind of goes along with the smaller form factor is the cageless design. So what they've done is they've put kind of a chassis that's stronger, and then they've mounted a bunch of 1/4 20 threads to it. So you can actually attach a bunch of stuff specifically to the 1/4-20 threads so that you don't need to put a cage on your body. This is one of the very first things that I did when I got the A7S III is I grabbed a cage so that I could start to mount things all over the camera. And while that's okay, and some people are definitely still going to need a cage depending on your setup, I find that being able to keep it small and light by having some of those 1/4-20 threads in the camera themselves is a huge advantage. But the one place that the cageless design really shines for me personally is being able to attach a tripod plate to one side of the camera and shoot vertical video without having to have a cage. This is the way that things are going. We gotta be shooting vertical video nowadays. Now, sometimes this works if you've got a ball head, you can just do it to the side, but on certain tripods, if you don't have the ability to tilt it to the side like that, it can be kind of a pain, and then that's where you need to add a cage. The next thing that we get with the FX3 that we don't get on the A7S III is the top handle and the audio options. So with the FX3, you actually get a unit that is a top handle as well as a dual XLR input audio interface. And it uses Sony's multi-interface shoe technology to be able to do it without having any cables. Now, this has pros and cons. It means that you have to eat up your hot shoe in order to get XLR inputs into the camera, but I think that that's a fair trade-off to be able to have that capability. And there's a lot that you can do with those audio inputs as far as different combinations and different volumes and different settings. It's really cool to be able to expand your audio capabilities, but they've still given you a regular 3.5mm mic jack on the camera body itself, so you can use it without that top handle as well. I've used it both ways, and it's so nice that it's modular. You can use it either way. The handle itself is actually really light too, so it doesn't add a lot of extra weight to the body. It's not the nicest handle in the world, but it definitely does the job, and it has a bunch of other 1/4-20 threads so you can attach other things to it as well. It also allows you in certain ways to have 4 inputs of audio, the 2 XLRs and then a left and right from a 3.5mm jack. So again, we're just kind of expanding our capabilities here. And finally, we've got the new record button and tally lights. So we've got a new record button on the front of the body. So if you're someone who films yourself like me, this is nice because you can reach out and you can hit it, as well as we've got new tally lights on the front and the top of the camera so you can see whether you're recording. Again, this is geared a little bit towards people who are filming themselves, but also any talent on camera can tell whether the camera is rolling or not. And of course, you have the option in the menu to customize that front button as well as customize the tally lights, so which ones are on and which ones aren't. Personally, I left them all on. I really like it. I can see right now that it's recording. And that's nice. Now, of course, there is no such thing as the perfect camera, and the FX3 had a very specific thing that it was going for, so we're going to have missed the mark on a couple of places or have things that could be improved for maybe a future generation. So let's talk about those. First of all, I think they could have done a little bit more with that top handle. The FX3 is a couple $100 extra on top of what you would pay for the A7S III, and I think a lot of that is the fact that you're getting the top handle with the audio interface as well. But personally, I think there are some things that they could have done with it that they kind of missed out on. For example, there is a microphone holder on it, but it is only for a specific size of microphone. It's not adjustable to fit different microphones. For example, my Rode NTG5, I had to wrap in a bunch of gaff tape so that it would fit in that spot. It also would have been cool to be able to see it used as a top handle with or without that audio interface. Maybe find a way to connect them so that you can use one or the other or both. As it currently stands, it's kind of all or nothing. And thirdly, I do have a little worry that it feels a little plasticky. I haven't had any bad experiences with it so far, but the FX3 itself feels like it's built like a tank, and then that top handle feels a little bit plasticky, like if you dropped it or something that could break pretty easily. Again, no bad experiences yet, but it does feel like it's not quite the same build quality as the rest of the body. The next thing that I would have loved to have seen on this camera is the ability to shoot with shutter angles rather than shutter speeds. And even then, you can't really dial it into a perfect 180-degree shutter rule. You just have to get it to the closest shutter speed you can. This is something that is pretty common in cinema cameras, and they did call this a cinema camera, so that would be something that I would love to see, and I think is possible in a firmware update. Something that is not possible with the firmware update is that they missed out on adding some tripod plate options on the bottom. Even something as common and simple as having the dual spots to mount your plate on the bottom of it so that it doesn't move side to side. One of the things that I think a lot of people would have liked to seen in the FX3 are internal ND filters. Now, I don't know what the technology is needed to fit internal NDs in a body this small, but because it's included in the cinema line, I think a lot of people would have really liked to have seen that, since that is is a more common feature on cinema cameras. Hopefully, with all the technology and how they're managing to make everything smaller, we might see that in something like an FX3 Mark II. Who knows? And then kind of wrapping up all of the things that I just talked about, I think they kind of missed the mark a little bit on the cinema label. Some of those things that I was just talking about would definitely help to kind of categorize it in that way. But in the end, the label doesn't really matter that much. It's how you use the camera and what works best for you. In my personal case, the FX3 is basically the camera that I've been wanting. It was basically the camera that I wanted when I bought the A7s III. The timing on that was a little annoying, but that's okay. I'm really excited to be able to get this and to use it more. But as always, I want to hear what you have to say, so make sure to leave a comment down below and let me know, are you an FX3 person or an A7s III? Which one would you choose? And on your way down there, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button, hit the bell notification so you don't miss out on future reviews and tutorials. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you to Canva for sponsoring this video, and I'll see you next time.